I just, well, not just, about an hour ago, I saw a new movie. It's Rocket Man. It's a biopic about the life of Elton John. Much anticipated, much advertised, and worth it. The thing with these movies that depict the life of famous artists, singers, like the recent one with Freddie Mercury, which I thought was awful, is that it's difficult to integrate the music into the script, into the story. And, maybe even sometimes the life of the artist is not as interesting as their music and their art. And in other cases, the life is much or as interesting as the art, but it's so outrageous, as in the case of Freddie Mercury, that it can't be depicted, I guess, for fear of not being accepted by the public. And let's not forget that, this is a different time, of course, but when Queen first came to America, they weren't accepted at all. They failed. They were considered too risque, too feminine. The Moors were different back then, in the 80s. They just come out with this video clip, and it's well known that Queen were pioneers in video clips, music video clips, but they pioneered, and with a very high artistic compass. But they just come out with the music video for It's a Hard Life, and because it portrayed them in drag, it was not accepted by the public back then, and they basically failed in their American debut. In this case, in the case of Rocket Man and Elton John, I'd say that maybe they tried to make the life interesting. The life it is interesting, but it's interesting because of the constant motion and, it's been said that, I think I saw that in a YouTube clip of Jack Nicholson, that the average celebrity meets, 100,000 times more people than the average person in a year. So the life of a celebrity is interesting in that way, the constant motion, the constant ins and outs and comings and goings. In the case of Elton John, they tried to insert the topic of his unhappy childhood, his struggle with his sexuality, the drug addiction. But these are common themes in the lives of famous artists. So I think that the script kind of lagged in some points, especially towards the end of the movie. I found myself checking to see how much time had passed, and that's always a bad sign as to the interest factor of a movie. If you have to check your watch to see how much more there is to go, it means that you've slipped out of the hypnotic state. that the movie is supposed to keep you in until the very end. But in any case, the star of the movie is the music of Elton John, the songs, and beautifully sung by the leading actor, and beautifully integrated, seamlessly and very poetically integrated into the rest of the movie. So it doesn't seem forced, like it did in the unfortunate case of Across the Universe, which was the music of the Beatles, the songs of the Beatles. That movie on paper should have been amazing. You know, the songs of one of the most celebrated bands of the 20th century, and an interesting story, because let's face it, the Beatles created and wrote their songs amidst some pretty turbulent times for world history, and they influenced the times and they were influenced by the times, and so the story went hand in hand with the songs, and yet there was something very contrived about the whole thing, too artificial. In the case of Rocketman, that's not so. The songs spring, naturally out of the story, very poetic way. The song that lends itself to the title of the movie, Rocketman, is probably the best example. So there was some pretty ingenious script writing in that respect. And the movie was publicized in that way, and as I don't remember exactly the term, but it was publicized as a poetic telling of the life of Elton John. So, and that's indeed what it was. So my only objection is the script. It could have been a little more powerful. A little more interesting. I found the psychoanalytical stuff a little too sentimental. Perhaps it's all true, perhaps, everything sprung from John's unhappy childhood, his quest for love, and I do believe all that. But it does slip, I think, a little bit into sentimentality. I mean, again, the real star of the movie is the music, the art, the songs, and the genius of the man. I mean, let's face it, he could hear the music in his, as with all great composers, he could hear the music in his mind, and he had to translate it to notes, which is no small task, of course. And my second big objection is the casting. I think Edgerton, if I'm saying his name correctly, does a decent job. I can't really tell if he's as good a singer as he appears to be, because with autotune these days you can take a mediocre or even bad voice and make it seem professional. Too many examples to name, but it's possible. So I think his portrayal of a gay character is sometimes a bit of a caricature, and I'd really have loved to have seen the movie with the person that Elton John himself had proposed as the person he would have loved to see portray him, which was Justin Timberlake. I guess he's now even too old to play the young Elton John. But I think he would have done an amazing job. I think he has, Timberlake, he has an innate vulnerability and sensitivity that would have matched that of Elton John perfectly. And just to get an idea of what it would have been like if Timberlake had played Elton John, you only need to see the retrospective, I don't know how to call that, music video of This Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore. I guess Elton John has retroactively made music videos of some of his most famous songs, and for the most part they're pretty amazing. The one with Tiny Dancer, I mean, they have a very high artistic sensibility. I don't know who made them, if it was a famous director or who, but they have some pretty interesting, amazing, poetic themes. I suspect that Elton John himself had much to do with creating these music videos. But the one for This Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore stars Justin Timberlake, and he gives a really touching portrayal of a young Elton John. So I would have loved to see him play John, but it didn't work out that way. Just as it didn't work out for Sacha Cohen playing Freddie Mercury, which I think would have been a really ingenious stroke of casting if it had worked out, but there were some pretty basic differences. You can find YouTube clips of both sides explaining how that fell apart. So, well, we got the recent Freddie Mercury biopic, which I thought was terrible, just awful. You know, it's pretty telling that I couldn't watch it more than once, although I've loved, I grew up with that music and those songs, and they're a part of my life. I just couldn't watch it more than once. It was just too, I have to do a whole different video to explain why I didn't like it. Miscast, too saccharine, but anyway. But Rocketman is a decent movie, it's a good movie. The songs are beautifully sung in a very poetic way, and I recommend it. You won't be disappointed at all.